was a report in the local papers entitled, "Armed Assault. 2 arrested for assault on arm boy." It explained how I'd become something of a curiosity to the local residents, and it showed a photograph of my dad. The court case stirred up quite a lot of atmosphere back home. Looking back on it, I think my mother was undergoing a slow process of grief, although both my parents were locked in the stage of denial. Life continued as normally as possible. Dad became head of a sales division. Everyone in the house either started smoking or started smoking more. Everyone in the house either started drinking or started drinking more. Anthony became one of the few punks on the Isle of Wight, which seemed to upset my mother even more than my irritating gesture. The issue of my arm became subsumed within the domestic routine. It no longer felt like a questionable act of will, but more like a fact of life, like a squint or a pigeon chest. I had pain, but mostly it felt numb, and the numbness was far outweighed by a continuing sense of euphoria, as well as breathing, smoking, drinking, watching TV, and occasionally going to school. This was also something that I did. I adapted my life to fit my circumstances and felt bemused when people or institutions seemed to make a fuss. I did as little with my life as I had done before, but now, when I was doing nothing, I had the sense that I was also doing something. And this balance kept me held, suspended, without future or failure. After a couple of years, when people realized it wasn't just a stunt, I began to feel my stature grow. Girls began to show an interest about nothing more than a kind of ghoulish fascination. I never mentioned my arm. I lost some weight. In 1979, after Anthony's A-levels, we all went to the Balearics for a fortnight. On our return, Anthony went to London, to art college in London. And I was referred by social services to a residential convalescence home for young people who had undergone trauma. As far as I could tell, the purpose for my stay was so that the members of the psychiatric departments of various universities could work out what the big idea was. I was subjected to a series of tests and lengthy interrogations about my family, my childhood. I was given the opportunity of confronting an imaginary cast list from my life through role play. Nobody ever asked me to put my arm down. But clearly they wanted a success, whatever that might mean. I was put in a group of similarly aged adolescents with similarly idiosyncratic manifestations. There were twin girls, Helen and Alison, who had refused to open their eyes since they were 9. Andy Beglin, who would never open his fists. A girl called Barbara Matthews, who, since the age of 5, had the contents of her stomach regularly removed because she kept on eating batteries. Myrna Kendall, who refused to wash, brush her teeth, or cut her hair, ever. There was an even fatter kid than me who had big issues with his own excrement, so we all kept our distance. And there was Kevin Proctor. Kevin was perfectly sensible, but would never wear any clothes if he could possibly help it. He would parade around the corridors displaying the thickest pubic hair and the smallest penis I've ever seen on a boy of 14. Like a peanut on a bird's nest. In all the investigations into the nature of my trauma, I remained unruffled. I didn't see what I had to offer. I had a sense from my parents that they were relieved to have their offspring off their hands. They were busy with their lives, and I don't remember not being busy with mine. Anthony was busy enough with his. He was squatting a house in New Cross with several friends. Every now and again he would send me postcards that he'd made himself with details of his new life. One vacation he came home and he took a series of photographs of my face. He glued the photographs onto canvas and then he painted over them with whitewash. He said he'd taken letters that I'd written to him, burned them, and then displayed the ashes between two plates of glass. He said on the course they were exploring representations of nothingness. Seemed a little heavy-handed, but I was flattered that he felt the need. At some point, Simon Martin, who had failed his exams and spent a year in Newport taking drugs, went to live with my brother in the squat. Simon earned money working in a petrol station, spent the rest of his time pretending to be an art student with my brother. Simon, then as now, was distinguished by a ruthless disregard for protocol. Together, he and my brother bulldozed their way through the London scene, private viewings at the ICA at Waddington's, the Serpentine, new romantic gatherings in Camden or the West End. Simon operated by the rubric Anthony sent me photographs of graffiti they'd done on the walls of the National Gallery, descriptions of junk installations they'd built in the squat, photographs of women they'd slept with. I walled myself up in my room. The psychiatrists had washed their hands of me. The only formal attention I received now was from the medical profession, who were concerned that if I continued the way that I was, that I would start to lose my fingers. Already by the age of 16, my hand was blackening from lack of blood, and most of my fingernails had fallen off. Doctors were worried that the flesh on my arm would become necrotic, and, in fairness, on a hot day, the smell was sometimes unavoidable close up. My one concession was to occasionally wear an elasticated mitten. But by and large, I didn't give it much thought. Excuse me. On December the 24th, 1982, outside a bus stop in Ryde, my mother fell down dead.